Assalamualaikum. Welcome to the weekly Sadaqayon program organized by Quantum Meditation Society London, where every week we learn some lessons from the teachings, the timeless teachings of spiritual masters, and cutting edge scientific inquiry to help bring peace, health, success, and fulfillment in our lives. Today, we are talking about effective study habits. A lot of our listeners are students, and in the past few decades, there has been systematic research on how we can study more effectively, how we can learn things more quickly. And today, we are going to go through some of the lessons that came out of those research. So let's just jump in. The one of the first lessons, I would say, a very important lesson that has come out of this inquiry into effective study habits is the importance of active recall, what scientists call active recall. So, what does that mean? Those of us who are regular in joining these quantum programs uh, know quite a bit about how our brains work, and we know that the way brain um, brain grows, brain learns is by new neural connections. We know that neurons that fire together wire together. So whenever we're learning something new, be it information or a new way of being, a new way of feeling emotions, a new set of neurons are firing together. And when that happens repeatedly, uh, those neurons get wired together. A new neural connection is being formed in the brain. And if we do it repeatedly, those circuits, those new neural circuits, become very strong and become a permanent, almost permanent part of our brain. Although the brain is always either pruning or strengthening its neural circuits based on how much we are using it. Now, when we are learning something new, when we are studying, um, three things need to happen in the brain. So, first, when you are studying, you are taking in the information. That new knowledge, new information is being encoded in your brain. So the first step is the encoding of the information, the new information, the new knowledge. The second thing that needs to happen is for that encoding, the new information that's been encoded, to be stored in the brain. So first it needs to come in, it needs to be encoded, then it needs to be stored by the brain. And also very important for academic success is the retrieval of the information. So when we're having difficulty answering a question in an exam, for example, we would think with our traditional thinking that, oh, we may think that the information didn't really go in, like there was some problem with what we now call encoding. But that might not necessarily be true. What might be causing you problem is that you at that moment are having problem retrieving that information from your brain. Because of that, researchers have found that the more active recall you include during your study, the more effectively you learn. The longer you remember it, the better you remember it. So what does that mean in a practical situation? So when I was young, people used to I heard of my parents, my mom saying, oh, people used to read very loudly, and they just kept on repeating things. And when I was growing up, still people would still be like, oh, King so and so, blah, 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 King so and so, blah, 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 King so, blah, blah. So that is an example of someone, maybe without understanding, just focusing on the encoding, and they might not be even be encoding because their mind might not be on whatever they're repeating again and again. But that used to be in past generations for a group of people, obviously not everybody, uh, how they studied. Like you were just reading something, repeatedly reading something. Uh, what the studies say is that because that does not focus on the retrieval part, that is a much less effective way of studying. Now, how the people who are most effective in studies, think of someone studying medicine in Cambridge University. Obviously, medicine is something where you need to learn a lot of information, right? And retain a lot of information. What they're doing is they're maybe reading one paragraph once or twice, then immediately closing the book, or metaphorically closing the book, covering the book, um, setting the book aside and trying to recall what they're studying. And to facilitate this recalling, you can use certain techniques. One is like create questions. Create questions. So say my year six um, son, he's starting a paragraph on history. So they're learning the history of the Crusades now. They will be learning the Christian perspective. They will learn the Muslim perspective. Very interesting to me, coming from a different country. But say you are reading a paragraph on that. What you can do is, along with reading the paragraph, you create some questions in your mind that the information in this paragraph answers. Create some questions in your mind that the information in the paragraph answer. So maybe but the paragraph you're reading are giving you the background of the First Crusade. So you create this question in your mind, like how did the first crusade start? And in your mind, when you're reading, you create a step-by-step answer, like, okay, first this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Just read the paragraph and see how many points it giving you in answer to that question. And then what you do is you try to, and without looking at the book or whatever resource you're using for as the source of your information, you answer that question in your mind. This is a much harder way of learning, right? This will make your learning much harder. But just like when you want to build muscles, right? You can't um, you can't build a muscle without actually lifting weights up, without giving it some resistance, right? You can't build the muscles in your biceps, for example, without just by reading about muscles, right? Similarly, because there is a biological foundation, right, to your learning, a biological foundation to how new information is encoded, stored in your brain, and what you can do to create the circuits to recall it effectively, because they might involve different parts of the brain. You have to make it work during your study process. Make those parts of the brain work during the study process. And the more you make them work, the stronger they become and the easier you find in the future to do the retrieval. So the first point is this. So instead of using passive techniques, some people just read. Other people may be taking notes, but they're actually looking at the book and taking notes, or listening to somebody and taking notes. And what, again, studies have found is that active recall is more effective than these techniques. Not that these are not useful, not that they're totally useless, but active recall uh, really helps you learn much more effectively. So whatever you are studying, you should make testing yourself as an integral part of your study. Don't wait till sometime in the future, the test date or a mock exam date, to see how much you have actually um, absorbed. You make it a part of your study. You can do it by creating questions and answering them in your mind. You can do it by summarizing the thing in your own way without looking. You can do it by creating a timeline. After you've studied, you can do it by creating a mind map of what you have studied, where you're relating all the concepts. Like, oh, this is the first crusade. Okay, this happened and this happened and this happened. So it's in the middle, and those are in the bubbles. And then here you can put the consequences. And then here in the middle, you can put some from descriptions. Like, these are the people. This is where it happened. These are the people who participated, and so on and so forth. So so that's the first point, is make active recollection, actively recalling, an integral part of your study process. And that's what successful students do. Okay, second point is spaced recollection. So the way our memory works is that we have short-term and long-term memory. So maybe today you learned about how your heart works, right? And this is you're taking biology, and you've learned the structure of the heart, structure and functioning of the heart. That's what you're studying now. So you may still remember it maybe an hour from now, or maybe tomorrow. But what this memory you have now, maybe in your short-term memory, but what happens with our memory, what scientists have found, is that eventually, if it's not being used, it it starts fading from your memory. So the short-term circuits fail to uh, transform into long-term circuits in your brain, because every day we're absorbing lots and lots of new information. Your brain cannot keep all of them. It decides what to keep based on what it thinks is important for you. And the one way you can make it think is important is through repetition. Make it think like, oh, this is something that's being used. So the way you can make sure that whatever you're learning goes into your long-term memory is letting it, like, forget it a little bit and then review it again. So your heart thing, you're studying it today, and then you, after a while, when you're more likely to maybe forget a little bit, go back to it, revise that. And then you're like, it's like your connection was becoming kind of a little like the neural circuit was becoming a little weaker, but then you used it again, now it's stronger. And then do it again and again and again. And because of that, successful students don't learn at the last moment. It doesn't work. Like there was a culture, I think it was in this country too, and then my some of my parents' generation got it when they came here to study. And then when I was growing up in schools, like the some of the kind of the stellar students would say, "Oh, I just study before the day of the exam," and it seemed like there was a little bit of pride associated with that. It seemed like it showed that, oh, you are very, very intelligent. And that was definitely there in the culture of certain schools and stuff like that. People didn't want to say that they worked very hard or they studied repeatedly. Those type of things, you can get by with them maybe when you're younger, but you cannot, like, if that is the habit you develop, it will be very difficult for you to be successful in life, be successful as you take on more and more and more um, responsibilities. It would be very difficult for you to be successful if you do not change those habits. So we in quantum say that start studying from the first day of school. The day you get your syllabus, start studying, study regularly. And if you do that, then you have that chance of maybe you learned a topic when it's first introduced 3 months before the test. You learned it for the first time one day, and then maybe 7 days later you go back to it, when you're forgetting, and then your circuits get one chance of strengthening. Then you get to it one more time 1 month before. And what will happen with this space recollection? So basically, what that means is you are recollecting, revising with some space in between. You are not studying the same thing for 5 hours in a row. You are studying, there's some space, there's some break, and you're revising it later. What will happen is that when the time of the exam comes or the interview comes, when you need to recollect it for some reason, you will see that, oh, by that point, it's become part of your long-term memory, and you are finding it much easier to recollect it, and you can go to your exam, your interview, or your presentation or whatever it is with a lot more confidence, because at that point it's part of your long-term memory. Now, obviously, a very relevant question is how much space? So scientists don't have definite answers to that question. What they say is how much space you should give between learning something for the first time and then going back to it, recollecting it, is depends on how difficult and complex you find the thing you're studying. So the rule is, if it's something that feels very difficult to understand, to understanding is a different thing, we'll come to it later, or to remember, to retain, you come back to it sooner rather than later. And sooner can even be later in the same day, a little later. But if it's relatively easy, you can come back maybe a week later. And then the second rule about how much space you should put between your studying is, you should, at first, the spaces should be less. So at first, there's less space between when you first learn and you come back. Then the second recollection, the third recollection, the fourth recollection, the space, you can make it longer and longer, because by that time it's a little stronger in your brain, so it will take you a little longer for the circuit to start becoming weaker, and you want to come back when it's becoming weaker, so that it's not redundant. You're coming back to the recollection is not redundant. So hope you found that useful, and you'll be able to utilize it in your studies. Now, very important in studying is the role of breaks. Again, like the ineffective study habits is cramming a lot at the last moments. Like we're not studying from before, we are not doing active recollection, active retrieval when we're studying. We haven't done spaced recollection. We're just like 1 week before the week of the exam, we are just sitting there, and then we pledge that I won't get up from my table for until at least this many hours have passed. And oftentimes we think that, oh, pulling all-nighters will solve all problems. I've done it too, to be fair. That if I'm up all night, I'll magically somehow be able to cover everything and it will have no adverse impact. Not true. It has a lot of adverse impact. Learning is best done when you're taking breaks in between. So say you were going to one evening, you were going to study for 2 hours, maybe if you're when you're getting older, maybe 3 hours, maybe on a weekend, you'll be studying in the morning, like you will be studying 4 hours. Take breaks in the midst of studying. Now, how often you need to take breaks will depend on obviously your focus. If you're like those Zen masters who can just focus for hours without any distraction, great. You may not need as many breaks, but typically what happens is the focus starts to wear off with time. And what we have found with studying is that our memory works in an interesting way. So say you study for 20 minutes. In those 20 minutes, of the things you learned in those 20 minutes, what will remember will depend on two things. One is primacy. I mean, several things, but in amongst those several things are two things. One is primacy and one is recency. So what is primacy? Primacy is the things that you learned when you first started studying, right? You start learning about the heart, and the first paragraph you learn after you started studying, you are more likely to remember it. Recency is the last thing you studied. So you're also more likely to remember the thing you studied last in those 20 minutes or 1 hour, 2 hours. So what happens when you take breaks? Say you take, after every 20 minutes, you take a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break even. What you're doing is you are giving yourself more primacy time and more recency time, because every time you're coming back, you get a new primacy time, right? If you study for 2 hours in a row, maybe you have the first 10 minutes and the 5 minutes or 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes that you remember very well. And in between, you have uh, an hour and 40 minutes that you don't remember so well. But if you gave yourself those breaks of every 20 minutes, then for every 20 minutes of studying, you remember 10 minutes, maybe the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes, because you have more primacy times and more recency times. So that's one of the reasons that it's important to give ourselves breaks. And when you're having the break, get off, walk, or do something like that, and then come back. The second thing about breaks, why breaks are very important, and it's not about just short breaks during your studying, but just breaks in your day when you're not actively trying to learn something. Okay, this is very important. Or not actively trying to learn something, or not actively trying to produce something, not actively trying to write your dissertation, because our brain has um, different states of being. When you're actively trying, when you're actively working, right? You're actively either trying to absorb something, trying to learn or recollect, or to maybe produce something, write an essay or solve a problem, uh, a scientific problem, a math problem, an algorithm problem. You are what the scientists call in the focused mode. You are actively focusing on one specific thing, which is important because that's when you're giving your brain the problem to be solved or the thing to be recollected. Now, there are other times when you are washing the dishes. You know, the washing dishes becomes quite mechanical. You can wander around in your head when you do that, or you're out for a walk, or the most famous, you're in the shower, when you may not be thinking about that problem that you're trying to solve directly. We think that at those times we are not working on the problem. Our minds are just wandering. But what scientists have found is that's not actually not true. Even though your conscious mind may be wondering, thinking about other things, it is in those times what they call the diffused mode, right? Focused mode, actively trying to learn, produce. Diffuse mode, that when you're letting your mind be, you're letting your mind wander. When you are in that state, that's when your subconscious mind is trying to put everything together. You know something from beforehand, you learn something new. That's when they're doing the synthesizing, even without you knowing. And that is why, if you, in your own life, if you read scientists' lives, if you read successful businessmen's life, my mentor, our mentor, our guru, you always get this brilliant ideas during those focused states of being, when you're in a focus mode, because that's when your subconscious is still working on it, and what it's doing is it's drawing upon all the knowledge you have, the new knowledge, the old knowledge, past knowledge, to synthesize and to work on the problem that you gave it, the challenge that you gave it. So, because of that, if you want to do high quality essays, high quality presentations, high quality books, or you want to solve a problem, it's very, very important to be in diffuse states of being throughout the day. I remember my brother. He studied in engineering university in Bangladesh, and then he got a Fulbright scholarship, and he went to do his PhD in computer science in the University of California at Berkeley, which has a very strong computer science program. So he was, for applying to US universities, you need to write a personal essay about why you want to do something. So I remember, like, he wrote, and he gave it to us, to me and my husband, to go through his essay and see if we could suggest any improvements. So he wrote about this incident there where he said he was trying to solve a problem related to an algorithm, and he had worked hard on it, and he just couldn't solve it. He just couldn't figure out how to do it. And then he lives in a part of Dhaka which is quite far from the university where he used to study, and he had to spend a long time every day caught in Dhaka's traffic jams. And one day he was just, he had given it a lot of time. He had a problem a lot of time. He couldn't solve it, but he was sitting in the traffic jam. And then suddenly the solution came to his mind. And I still remember he wrote, like, I will never ever look at traffic jams the same way again. Like, because traffic jams people find them super annoying, right? But because he found the solution came to him while sitting in a traffic jam. Um, it completely changed his how he viewed traffic jams. So that's how the diffuse state of being works. And everything I'm saying today is backed by hard science. So give it a try because it may seem like, oh, am I wasting my time? But no, it's like it's about working smarter. Anything you want to do in life is about a smart, will be improved by a smart way of approaching it. So, so that's the importance of breaks. Now, another thing that's related to this is the importance of sleep. Um, Again, this is something that researchers have been researching a lot over the past few decades, and we now know that when we're sleeping is when everything that we learned during the day is consolidated in our mind. When we're sleeping, that is when the brain is taking everything that went in that day and then trying to relate it to everything that it already knows, and also trying to decide whether it should go through the long-term memory or not. So if you are sleep deprived, that doesn't work. Matthew Walker is a very, very famous sleep scientist. He says, just like sponges absorb water, right? But if your sponge is already super wet, will it still be able to absorb the same amount of water? No. So that's the same thing happens when you're sleep deprived. You are like a sponge that is waterlogged. So depending, like if you don't get enough sleep, your ability to learn can be up to 40% less. That's a lot less. So one more point against cramming at the last moment, staying up all night, it doesn't work because sleep is an integral part of your learning process. And some people, they even take naps. Um, some people, if you take a little bit of nap in the afternoon, you start something, you do a few versions of reading before that, and then you do a few repetitions after that, you will probably learn a lot better. If you are starting a new topic, try this. Do a few, like go through it once or twice or several times in the evening, then keep the next morning to go through the same thing again. In between, you get a full night's sleep. You will see that you are learning it much faster. So that's the importance of sleep. So we don't want to prolong too much because last week it was too long. I would say two last points. One is a footnote is like make sure you understand. And how do you know you understand what you're studying? This is Richard Feynman, the super, super famous physicist, says that the test of whether you really understand something or not is whether you can explain it to a 5-year-old or not. Someone who has really understood something can explain it in very, very easy language. So if you can go and explain what you just learned to your 5-year-old niece or brother, you're in good shape, okay? But if you can't, you need to resort to technical language, then you're like maybe you're still a little, there's still some lack of clarity in that part where you're going back to using technical language and jargons that a 5-year-old won't understand. So maybe you need to spend a little more time trying to understand that. Now, if what often happens is like you change schools, you change countries, you change systems, or you are not that serious in your younger grades, and you're older and now you're very motivated, you want to do well, but you're finding it very difficult to understand things. And at first it can be very frustrating, but that is happening because you lack foundational knowledge, okay? Knowledge is built on top of on top of stacks of previous knowledge. If that happens, don't give up. People can learn a lot um, in a short amount of time, but do go back and learn and try to learn the foundational knowledge. There is this very interesting story from the life of one of Bangladesh's most famous writers, Humayun Ahmed, who was a very good student, went to study, do a PhD in chemistry in the US, and in one course in in the after the first term he got zero. He failed, or I think he actually did get zero. And everybody advised him to drop that course. They were saying, like, listen, there is a lot of foundational knowledge, a lot of background you need to succeed in this course. You don't have it. Why don't you choose an alternative course? But what happened was that in the same course, there was a guy who was visually impaired, and he got the highest marks. And Humayun Ahmed told himself, if he can do it, being visually impaired, I can do it. But what he needed to do over the next time is spend a lot of time learning, gaining the foundational knowledge. And then came the day when he got the results from the end of term exams and the next term, and guess how much he got? He got 100 out of 100. So you can do it too. Okay, the last point is, in everything in life, your state of mind matters. The state you're in while doing something matters. If you're studying in a bored state, if you don't know why you are studying, you won't be able to absorb the things. It will, like, it probably won't be even encoded. So make sure you know what your goal is. Make sure you know why you are studying, and spend a little time before you're studying just getting your mind in the right state. Try to study at the same time every day. That will condition your mind to go in that focus mode during your study time. Um, and keep your environment nice, keep yourself nicely hydrated, drink lots of water, and so that you are ready to study. The final thing you can do to sort of focus and bring your mind back to in a prime state, to prime your mind for studying, are a couple of things that we quantum graduates have been using for a long, long, long time. The first thing is a technique where we call getting to the 0 point. And for that, what you need to do is to draw a spiral. Take a piece of paper, start drawing a spiral from the outside, and start going in, without the lines overlapping or touching each other, until you get to the center. And while you're doing it, you tell yourself that when my pen or pencil reaches the center, my mind will be free from all distractions and will focus on only this being the topic that you are going to study now. Start doing it, and you will see that, with time, you really, and not long either, you are really, really being able to be very focused in those times to learn the things you're supposed to learn much more quickly. And the other things quantum graduates use a lot is meditating. So we simply go in the meditative state, we go to our quantum home, then we give ourselves auto suggestions that I'm going to study this topic now. Everything I study will be encoded in my brain very well, and will be encoded and stored very well. And whenever I need to, I will be able to recall it, retrieve it easily, fully, accurately. And you can modify this being the central message. You can modify your auto suggestions, but take this state seriously and do this build up. We even have meditations for students. Unfortunately, the English ones were not ready yet, but you can do it yourself. You know the steps of going to the quantum home. Go there, give yourself this auto suggestions, then open your eyes without counting from 0 to 7. So you're not coming back to the normal conscious state. Just open your eyes and study, and tell yourself, and this state, I'll be in this state for the next this this many minutes or this many hours, and start with smaller times, and then do it for longer lengths of time. Okay, so that is our topic for today: effective study habits, active recall, spaced recollection, importance of breaks, importance of sleep, importance of understanding, and importance of being in the right state of moment, and the state of being for studying, and for that using the spiral technique, getting to zero technique, or going to a quantum homes technique. So today we are going to just again practice relaxation, because everybody just loves deep relaxation. Okay, so I hope you love it too. You have grown to love it too. So let's do that, because we do everything better, learning better when you're in a relaxed state. As always, give me a minute, and if you have any problems, please write in the chat, and I'll try to fix it.